Yo, what is going on, guys? It's TheJuan&Only, and today let's dive into the iPad Pro 3rd generation. If any of you are familiar with Apple products, you may be well aware at how aesthetically pleasing they look. If you're any familiar with the iPad, you may notice some drastic changes to the new generation. Obviously, us as consumers are demanding smaller and smaller bezels, and the iPad took some hints from its cousin, the iPhone XS. What many may not know is that the price also increased, as it seems to be the norm with Apple. The 11 and 12-inch iPad Pros now start at $799 and $999 respectively, up about $200 after taxes. You know what I could do with $200? A plane ticket to your mom's house. I'm kidding, but stay tuned as we dive into an in-depth comparison between the 2nd generation iPad Pro versus the newer, sexier iPad Pro 3rd generation.
It's the kind of beat to go.
Let's start with the obvious. You know how if you have a girl that's say a 6, that's pretty good, but put that same 6 next to a 3, and now that 6 turns into a hot mama coming in at an Ultra 10. Well, that's the same thing here. The new iPad Pro 3rd generation is just so gorgeous, and no doubt, design-wise, looks so much better than the previous model. The old 2nd gen 10.5 inch for some reason had slimmer bezels than his fatter older brother. I don't know why that is, but on the 2nd gen 12.9 inch, the bezels are extremely noticeable. Granted, the side bezels are actually roughly the same size on both, but the fact that it did away with the top bezels and the home button really makes the new 3rd generation stand out. In regards to thickness, Apple managed to make the new generation even thinner. The 12.9 inch 2nd gen comes in at 6.9 millimeters, and the 3rd gen comes in at 5.9 millimeters. Crazy, I know. Also, quick note, the 3rd gen iPad has sharp edges and is more of a box form, similar to your iPhone 4 and 5 designs, which I am a huge fan of, and your 2nd gen is, well, rounded like we've been accustomed to since the iPad 2. Let's look at the screens. So the screen size didn't change on the 12.9 inch models, but they did on the smaller models. You go up to an 11 inch screen from a 10.5 inch screen, and ladies, y'all tell me if the extra inch is worth it, for real. Anyway, trying to keep this PG. Both generations are gonna have that Pro Motion technology that is near impossible to portray on camera. Basically, this technology allows the refresh rate for fluid scrolling that is extremely nice to have on a screen this big at 120 Hz instead of your usual 60 Hz like on your iPhone. That means that swiping between apps and drawing will be as snappy as ever and literally feels unreal. Honestly, you really need to see it to believe it. It's like a flowing river, bro, no joke. Now, the 120 Hz is not going to be utilized on every application. Your iPad will adjust whatever you're doing, so unfortunately, playing games or watching YouTube videos won't be exactly at 120 Hz. I know, sad story. Your new 3rd generation is going to feature that new fancy liquid retina screen, which is yet again a marketing tool by Apple that basically means this LCD screen curves. The older generation is going to have the regular old retina display. Sounds really outdated when you put it that way, huh? But trust me, it's basically the same thing. True Tone display can be found on both and will make your screen warmer or cooler depending on your surroundings. Getting into the geeky technical stuff, both generations are going to feature a pixel density of 264 ppi, a fully laminated display, which is always a plus, no air gaps between the screen and glass, and a P3 wide color gamut. Going into how to unlock your iPad, well, the new iPad is basically an upscaled iPhone XS. The new generation eliminated the home button, so you'll have to use all your gestures like swiping up to go home instead of your Touch ID sensor on the 2nd generation. Honestly, I don't think this is that big of a deal on the iPad, since I always found unlocking it with Touch ID to be a bit awkward. I don't know, like getting my thumb down there on such a big device just felt weird, you feel me? Don't judge. In addition to that, you will now use Face ID on the new iPad Pro, which can now be used to unlock your iPad with your beautiful face in any orientation, whether in landscape or portrait. Over in the camera department, we unfortunately do have some trade-offs. As far as the front camera goes, it's a nice upgrade. You're going to have all those sensors at the top for Face ID, which is now going to make your camera a true depth camera. You'll also finally have portrait mode and all the portrait lighting while still rocking that same 7 megapixel camera. On the back side is where we definitely do see bigger differences. Still going to sport that same 12 megapixel camera with an f1.8 aperture, still going to have those burst shots and panorama, but where we do see some differences is that the new iPad iPad now has that cool smart HDR feature that the iPhones now have. But I think the biggest drawback is that the new iPad does away with optical image stabilization, which makes your video recordings look a little shakier, and you'll notice a huge difference when doing video recording on close-up objects. While this shouldn't be an issue for most, it is important nonetheless. But then again, if you're taking selfies with your iPad or go out in public taking pictures looking all stupid, then you should probably reevaluate your life. It's hard to believe this iPad can be any more different, but internally, we got a lot going on. The new iPad is a beast when it comes to performance, sporting the A12X Bionic chip with the Neural engine, whereas the previous generation has the A10X. Don't get me wrong, the A10X was already blazing fast, but this brings the new iPad to an entirely new level. In fact, according to Apple, this iPad is supposed to be faster than 92% of all other notebooks. 92% of them. Let's just let that sink in. Additionally, Apple threw hella shade at Xbox and showcased the graphical performance of this beast of an iPad. According to Apple, the new iPad is going to give Microsoft the run for their money and claims the graphics on the new iPad are on par with that of the Xbox One. However, mobile devices manage internal memory a bit differently, so it's unlikely you'll ever get similar performance out of it to match the Xbox One. On the subject of performance, typical Geekbench scores are showing enormous improvements on the new iPad. Single core scores for the new 3rd gen iPad Pro and 2nd gen iPad Pro are 5,015 and 3,911 respectively. On the multi-core side, we have a whopping 18,027 versus 9,463 on the previous model. Insane, I know. Of course, Geekbench scores are going to vary slightly here and there, but it's a rough estimate and it gives you a good idea of how these devices are going to perform. Both iPads are going to have 4 gigabytes of RAM, although it is interesting that if you get the fully spec'd out 1 terabyte iPad Pro 3rd gen, it comes with 6 gigabytes of RAM, which I think is pretty interesting. Apple never releases the clock speeds on their mobile device internals, but according to Geekbench, we have a clock speed of 2.46 gigahertz on the new iPad and 2.34 gigahertz on the previous model. Another important aspect is that the new iPad 12X chip is going to pack in 8 cores, 4 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, so it'll be enough horsepower to power those desktop tier apps on your iPad. It sounds very convincing with everything I told you to go and get this iPad now, but hold your horses. Remember, this iPad is expensive as hell. You have to almost even sit down and have a conference with your inner thoughts to really think this purchase through. With all that being said, weigh out your options. In terms of the smaller stuff like speakers and cameras, yeah, you get a slight boost in that department, but take a look at the broader picture. The iPad Pro 3rd generation has been criticized by some for being too powerful for its own good. It has monster specs, but does it really take advantage of it? Because it is still a mobile device. It is still running iOS, not Mac OS. So it is very limited in how it can use all that power. We do have Adobe Photoshop coming to it in 2019. So that would be a huge selling point for it. If this tablet could run the full version of Final Cut Pro on it, then I would recommend it 10 out of 10 all day, every day. Let's also not forget that this iPad does not support the old generation Apple Pencil. So if you're into drawing or graphic design, keep in mind you'll have to drop an additional $130 to also use the Apple Pencil on the Pro-ish tablet. Yes, it may look extremely good looking and feels even more amazing in the hands, but check your bank account, maybe even review your credit limits on your credit cards, because you will be dropping a really pretty penny on this iPad. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Hope I prepped you enough before you fork over that credit card to Apple. Definitely subscribe if you haven't already and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my videos. I'll see you all later. Peace.